Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Fantastic Four, the 2015 adaptation of the popular comic book. You should know before I start getting into this wonderful movie that I am not a fan of the comic books. I've never really read them. I'm sure I've seen the TV show, but I can't really recall any memories of that either. So I have no emotional investment in this film's source material, so I'm not going to judge it based on whether it's an accurate representation or not. I did see the last two movies, though. I never did watch the Roger Corman unreleased Fantastic Four flick. I probably should. But I think they were the Tim Story Fantastic Four movies. I thought they were just average comic book films, no better or worse than most. So when they announced that they were going to do another one, I was like, eh. And then when I saw the trailer, I was really taken aback by how nothing about any of this film's trailers stood out to me. And the reason for this is I actually can remember the trailer for the original Fantastic Four pretty well. Even the sequel, The Rise of the Silver Surfer. Like, I remember that corny-ass line where the tagline is, you know, one bad, four fantastic. And I can remember, like, you know, various visuals such as, you know, Dr. Doom killing that dude in the garage. And then with the Rise of the Silver Surfer, I remember, you know, they're at the wedding and then the Silver Surfer attacks, and then he gets in kind of a brawl with the Human Torch. You know, bits and pieces have retained, and some of those pieces are actually large chunks. And the thing is those Fantastic Four movies, they were really cheesy. They were really corny. I will admit that when I saw those trailers, I rolled my eyes at them. But my mind has also, or my memory has also retained quite a bit of them, so that does say something. Yeah, the cheesiness is pretty bad, but at least that helps the film stand out. That gives it its identity. But nothing about this new one was doing that for me in any of the previews, whether they were some of the better received previews or not. Like even now, I'm drawing blanks. And yeah, it's the previews for this new Fantastic Four. They weren't cheesy or anything. There was nothing worth rolling my eyes over. But when you took that element away, you suddenly left it with nothing. And therefore, you know, I was hopeful that maybe this would be a good film because I did like the director's previous work, which was Chronicle. But I can't really say I was all that excited. And then the critics started mangling this movie really badly. And then I actually became a little bit excited because I figured, hey, maybe this will be like a total disaster, a complete train wreck, and it'll be a lot of fun to dissect and review. And I was disappointed. The film ended up being better than what I was expecting, but not to the point where it was good. Throughout my viewing experience, I was just bored. There was nothing interesting about this movie. There was nothing particularly good about it. There was nothing especially bad about it either. It was just, I just felt like I was watching a bunch of nothingness occur on the screen. So how do I describe a movie that can be summed up in one word, which is boring? Well, let's talk about the narrative. In a lot of ways, this film's narrative was structured much like Ant-Man's was, in that most of the spectacle, most of the action and special effects, it's reserved for the finale. Up until then, you barely know that this is a comic book film. The difference is Ant-Man kept us entertained by pacing itself nicely, you know, giving us good characters to like, lots of funny dialogue, some intense scenarios. even if it wasn't, throwing a bunch of action scenes at us. Fantastic Four does not have likable or interesting characters. The dialogue didn't stand out at all. I'm like trying to think of any lines. Was it just like all technobabble and exposition? Because I do remember it's clobbering time. There you go. So there was just nothing to really keep me invested. It was surprisingly slow-paced. Not a whole lot of stuff seems to really happen during the first half. I'm trying to think, okay, they're building this device, and they're building this device. That is all I could seriously remember of what occurs in this movie. Now, you could argue that this time was really being spent on the characters, and in a way I kind of feel like the director wanted to do more of a character understudy superhero flick, except by the end of the film you don't really know anything about any of these people, so that really can't be the case. So in terms of like the various characters and their dynamics and relationships, my problem was every interaction was terse and awkward. Nobody really seemed to like each other, and when they did, they'd just be like stumbling over their feet and looking really goofy, but not in a way that I found to be charming. Like when it comes to the previous Fantastic Four movies, they were not good films, but they at least had a sense of fun about them. The characters did have pretty solid chemistry, and you could see why they'd hang around each other. Here, you just don't get that at all, and it's weird because, Reed and Ben are supposed to be really close friends, but do you see them do a whole lot together? No. You see them together as kids, where they kind of bond over this failed experiment, and it cuts to when they're adults, and Ben's just really moody and quiet and angsty, and Reed, he's focused more on whatever the situation is at the time, whether it's his project or discussing or talking with Sue and her father. You just don't really see anything there between them, and so when shit goes down later on in the movie, it's hard to care because they just haven't had a whole lot of interactions to where I could buy them as really good friends. In a lot of ways, I thought the Sue and Johnny Storm relationship was worse because, so there's a lot of controversy surrounding the casting of Johnny Storm. He's black, and his father's black, and Sue is white, and a lot of people hated this because it changed the source material. I personally don't care in itself, and I feel this way about a lot of race bending, even though I understand why it upsets so many people. To me, if the actor is good enough to make up for it, I am fine with it, even though there are going to be exceptions. There have been times when that has totally backfired, but when I heard that the guy from Chronicle is going to be playing this character, I was like, okay, I could buy that. And I didn't think his acting was bad, even though I'll talk a little about that later. But I didn't really feel any kind of chemistry between him and Sue. They don't act like siblings. You don't see really a significant amount of warmth there. They just treat each other like casual friends. Now, early on in the movie, they kind of set up that maybe Johnny feels some resentment towards her because she's almost like his father's favorite because she's really working to be a successful scientist or whatever. Whereas Johnny Storm's kind of a thrill seeker who's obviously a little troubled, and there's like just one line where they kind of set this up and then they never go anywhere with it. So it's not like there's any big reconciliation scene. There's no big blowout scene where they totally, or where he freaks out at her. It's just throughout the movie they act like casual friends. There was just nothing there to that relationship. Therefore, I feel like the whole adoption angle, where Sue was adopted into this family was totally unnecessary. They do nothing with it. It just seems like, the director wanted to work with this actress and this actor, so he just completely wrote in a single line of dialogue explaining why they are of different race. The love story is oddly even worse than that. So Sue and Reed, they're supposed to be like the anchor couple of Fantastic Four, except they have like 2 scenes where they interact with each other, and the first time he's just acting like a goofball and she seems kind of annoyed by him, but she's too polite to really say anything. But then, the scene ends and you don't really feel like she's warming up to them, but then in a later sequence you see them talking and they're smiling, and it could once again easily be friendship, but that's it. And was it even really a love story? Because by the end of the film, there's no indication that's going to happen. Another thing that kind of bothered me too is everybody seems to be attracted to Sue. And while I liked, I think her name's Kate Mara, I think she's a good actress, and she's pretty good looking too, but she's kind of aloof and cold, and she's not physically attractive enough to make up for that. So I kept wondering, how come everybody is giving her, that look? Ben Grimm in the very beginning of the movie, he's kind of staring at her all creepy, and then Dr. Doom takes this into a whole new level. God, yeah, Dr. Doom, he's interesting for all the wrong reasons. So that was a minor point. But then, okay, so Dr. Doom is kind of stalking her. He has a huge crush on her, apparently. And at no point do they ever do anything with this. Is that what drives him to become evil? No. Does that lead to his potential salvation? No. Does she even ever seem to realize he likes her? I don't know. At the very end, he's like, there could have been another future for us. And it's just, they're not doing anything about that. I think the only reason that exists is so he could be distracted near the end, because while he's talking to Sue about how they could have been so much, that allows the good guys to sort of make a comeback. But otherwise, it just adds nothing to the characters. And the thing with Dr. Doom that I don't like, Dr. Doom is supposed to be the overarching villain of this franchise. He is the Fantastic Four equivalent of Lex Luthor or the Joker. Who's Spider-Man's main rival? I always presumed Venom, but he's, I guess, more of an anti-hero. And growing up, I always thought it was Dr. Octopus, but it might be Green Goblin, but I never even heard of Green Goblin before the first movie. But if you want to answer that, be my guest. But I just don't know what I'm supposed to feel about him. On one hand, he is a tragic villain. He is a victim of circumstance. On the other, he's kind of a douche, even before he becomes evil. He's socially awkward, but he's like the negative archetype of that kind of character, whereas Reed is the positive archetype. He's not full-on despicable, but he's not especially likable either. And yet, because he's obviously been driven insane by something he probably could not really control, when he does start killing people, it's still hard to hate him. And in the end of the movie, what really pissed me off is I still didn't know what I was supposed to feel about him. At one point, Reed, who is responsible in many ways for all this shit going down, and he has felt a significant amount of guilt for all this, he makes some corny, stupid one-liner right before he's about to finish Dr. Doom. And I was like, really, man? I don't like you. So it's like that weird mix of Dr. Doom is just, he's not very likable, he's not very hateable, he's just sort of inconsistent, and at the same time he's really boring, just like everybody else. And I don't blame the actor, I just blame how the character is portrayed. I'm not too big on the look, although I didn't hate it as much as everybody else apparently has. And the best scene in the movie is when he starts rampaging, blowing up people's heads. I was like, shit, man. Granted, this would feel more it would feel more natural in an Akira adaptation, but not a Fantastic Four movie. But you know, I'll take it. This one scene has kind of entertained me. But like in terms of all the other characters, you don't really know anything about them. You know, the Thing, Ben Grimm, he's serious. That is the extent of his personality. And you know, when he becomes the Thing, he gets all angsty. Okay, that's really all there is to say about him. And Johnny Storms, like I said, he's kind of a thrill seeker, but there's no real depth to his charm. I actually thought that the previous line of Fantastic Four films did a decent job at exploring that character somewhat, even though he was often more annoying in that movie. Reed, he's the protagonist, and yet he's supposed to have undergone this character arc where, you know, he kind of flees after they transform, and so everybody feels betrayed by this, but at the same time nobody really seems to hold it against him too much, and yet obviously this has, you know, created some inner conflict added to the guilt he already feels. However, like by the time it's resolved, I was thinking, you know, there is a very practical reason for him fleeing, because he figures that they are going to experiment on them and weaponize them, and that they don't really want to make a cure for them. And I'm thinking, that's actually kind of reasonable. Why doesn't he really explain this to them? Because he's obviously working on a way to fix things. So that just... it could have been done if there was just more time dedicated to it and you understood the motivations and stuff more clearly. Speaking of which, it's another thing that I hated about Doctor Doom, is that you never understand why he's doing any of this. It's all vague, and they have like some foreshadowing, like how he says, you know, maybe humanity doesn't deserve a second chance very early on, and it just was very forced. So when it came to the characters, you don't care. Their dialogue, you don't care. This film is so flippin' dreary and bleak that there's just no fun in it at all. It's visually unappealing. The previous Fantastic Four films, for all of their script problems, at least they had some eye-popping colors. Here, they're just all muted and ugly. And the special effects, they're not as bad as what I feel people are making them out to be, but they're not particularly good either. There's nothing about the visual effects that really stood out. You know, whether it was, I don't know, the best part is probably when, you know, some certain moments during the finale in terms of the special effects. Then the worst is when he's messing around with his face, which I thought was stupid, but none of it was good or bad enough to really, you know, have an impact on me. The action scenes, average. The problem is you have to wait until the ending, and then the action scenes just are kind of underwhelming and unsatisfying. So I mean, like Ant-Man, it may have made you wait for the action scenes, but at least that had some real cool, stylish you know, action sequences. Here it's just is there any... let me pull up my notes real quick just in case I'm missing anything. Here's my biggest problem with a film like Fantastic Four. These comic books are rooted in camp way too much. They're supposed to be lighthearted and cheesy to an extent. I mean, yeah, maybe the previous films took that too far, but it still feels more natural for the Fantastic Four concept than, you know, taking it too seriously. I had the same issue with Man of Steel, and I watched that again a couple weeks ago, and I still didn't like it very much. But it's at least like in that movie, everything does feel important. It does feel like there is a sense of direction, even if the story isn't told very well. Here you don't have any of that. You don't know what the plot is until the last 20-30 minutes. Up until then, it's kind of meandering, killing time, which is part of the pacing issue. But, you know, both of these films, they're trying to be grounded in reality. They're trying to be darker interpretations, and I just don't think that works very well with these kinds of characters. I mean, when you look at the Fantastic Four, they're called the Fantastic fucking Four. I am not going to be able to take that seriously in a serious movie. Look at Dr. Doom. You have a villain named Doom. A lot of people hated that apparently they tried to change that name. I understand that, but I actually kind of understand where the filmmakers are coming from as well, because, once again, it's hard to take that seriously. It sounds so cheesy and campy, and that's why it fits better in the previous movies, because those films were cheesy and campy. So this was just a bad, misguided idea, but it's above everything boring. Some films are so memorably terrible that they almost become legendary for it. When you think of Dragon Ball Evolution, The Last Airbender, Star Wars Episode 1, the badness within those movies does jump out at you. They do stand out. Transformers 2 is another one. So, even though you're making fun of them, even though you're tearing them apart, they do serve a purpose as bad movies because they allow you to do so. Here, I'm not going to remember any of the reasons why this movie failed a week from now. I'm just going to remember my general summation, which is boring, and you can't really do anything with that. So not only did it fail to be a good movie, in a way it failed to be a bad movie too. So I cannot recommend this for anybody. If you're a fan of the Fantastic Four comic books, you're going to be pissed because this presumably isn't a faithful adaptation. And if you liked the previous movies, you're going to hate this because it's just too grim and too slow and boring and not fun at all. And if you're indifferent either way and you just want to go to the theaters and have a fun time, obviously you know what I'm going to say about that. If you really, really want to see this movie, I say wait until it comes out on DVD and try not to pay for it. I probably would have been, I don't want to say less angry, because really this film didn't leave me that angry. It just kind of left me feeling emotionally cold and detached. Terminator Genesis pissed me off a lot more, but at least it got a reaction out of me, and I could sort of see why some would like that. Jurassic World probably pissed me off a lot more too, and I don't think Jurassic World's that bad of a movie. It just wasn't the movie I wanted it to be. But Jurassic World is significantly better than this. But at the same time, I almost wish I was angrier. I almost wish I felt something more passionate. But no, it's just not very good. I did not do a written review, but I have done written reviews of Pound of Flesh with Jean-Claude Van Damme. I've released a page of mini reviews where I talk about various movies I would not do the full written review treatment of. This includes the Mad Max movies, Dirty Harry movies. I included my David Cronenberg movies, and then other films that I just saw over the past few months that I felt like talking about a little bit. And The Vatican Tapes, which is a generic exorcism flick, which still is less boring than this movie. And then my next one will probably be Star Wars Episode 1, so joy. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter, especially if you're a fan of wrestling, because I talk a lot about that there. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I shall see you guys later.